To the September 12th, 2017 Finance Committee meeting. Committee members present this evening, myself, Councilor Di Natale, Councilor Beazall, Councilor Donnelly, and President Kuchmarek. Also present this evening, Councilors Boschman and Clark, and City Auditor Calvin Brooks. We will start with, councilors, if there's no objection, I want to start with 218-17, the last order on the agenda. For the payment in lieu of personal property taxes agreement, that whereas in the opinion of City Council, it is in the financial interest of the City of Fitchburg to execute a certain payment in lieu of taxes pilot agreement with NHS Solar Garden.com LLC and Alpine Ridge LLC, and whereas the execution of this agreement will provide more financial certainty as to the stream of income from personal property taxes, now therefore it is ordered that in consideration for the payment schedule enclosed in the agreement, the city agrees to accept said payments in lieu of personal property taxes. It is further ordered and voted that Stephen L. Di Natale, Mayor of the City of Fitchburg, be hereby authorized for and on behalf of said city to execute, acknowledge, and deliver said agreement, and does hereby ratify said executed agreement. Chief of Staff Terigny and Assessor Wilson.
So just briefly, I was asked to come because I'm the most familiar with these agreements. Essentially, this is the same agreement that you've voted on before. We now have it down to sort of a boilerplate agreement for any of these solar projects that we have. And the variable information is always done in the appendices at the back of it. And so to simplify this, basically, solar has been exempt in the city under Mass General Law for a long time. That's why these solar arrays that you see on buildings, personal houses, are not taxable. And there's a couple wrinkles, and essentially, they've always been taxed. The Department of Revenue has always determined that they're taxable as long as they're used to the energy is consumed on site. So that was the operation that we were working under. We've taxed a few in the past. A few have been exempt because they've been using the energy on site. And then Westboro sent out a tax bill to one of these, and they challenged it at the Appellate Tax Board. The Appellate Tax Board found that not only would it be exempt if the electricity was used on site, it would be exempt if the electricity was used on any other taxable parcel. And they stopped short of saying what would happen if those other parcels weren't owned by the current owner of the solar array. So to make a long story short, there's some legislation pending for this, and we're basically, some good legislation away from being able to tax all of them. And there's also a couple of ATB cases, and we're one bad decision away from making none of them taxable. So the city's approach has been to enter into these agreements, which essentially give the developer a small discount at the very beginning in the form of accelerated depreciation. But over the life of the array, we would collect just as much in taxes as we would if there was no pilot agreement. And we've done this just to secure our interest going forward, so that no matter what happens at the ATB, and no matter what happens with Mass General Law, we can still collect on these under the agreement. I'd like to open up if anyone has any questions. Or
Motion to approve 17.
Motion made and seconded to approve 218-17. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Councils, we'll move to the top of the agenda. We have the first three items on the agenda are older items. This is for cleanup purposes. 6213 is a petition requiring all departments which have an enterprise fund to fund OPEB, other post-employment benefits for their employees. This was filed by then Councilor Hay in 2013.
Motion to give leave to withdraw to 06213, 25313, and 20814.
Motion made and seconded to give leave to withdraw 6213, 25313, and 20814. Speaking on the motion, Councilor Donnelly.
Mr. Brooks says.
About which one in specific? Let me just read them.
213, post-employment benefits.
So 6213 is what I just read. 25313 is an ordinance that Chapter 44, Section 10 of the Code of the City of Fitchburg, under positions paid annually as most recently amended, be further amended by adding thereto school committee vice chairperson and school committee member effective January 6, 2014, as outlined in the enclosed ordinance. And 20814 is a petition to implement the Massachusetts Meals Tax Program for the purpose of creating a means to fund additional marketing and community development efforts in the city. Mr. Brooks, would you mind addressing 6213?
Sure. I guess this was just to include the enterprise funds in the funding of the OPEB obligation. We haven't really addressed that yet with the enterprise funds. I think the money that's come in has come in through the general fund, but at some point that would have to be addressed.
And I recommend the airport be included too.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think that would be, basically it would be addressed through the indirect costs.
Any other questions on the three old petitions? All those in favor of giving leave to withdraw?
Aye.
Opposed? They have been given leave to withdraw. Next, we'll go to 21517, order that the City of Fitchburg approves the expenditure of funds from the Massachusetts Emergency Management State Homeland Security Program grant in the approximate amount of $4,981.07 for the purpose of said grant, which is to purchase equipment for the city's Community Emergency Response Team, CERT, and to provide training for the team. Chief Roy.
Councilors, thank you. Once again, we've been awarded a CERT grant for our Citizens Emergency Response Team, of which we now have approximately 10 members that Lieutenant Liberatore has doing various things, volunteering their time. This money will be spent on a number of smaller items, mainly rechargeable batteries that have been used for a long time in the department. Some shirts for the volunteers, and a laptop computer for some of the emergency management things that we have to keep on board. It's a state grant. There's no match on it. It's just a straight EMPG grant for us, and everything will go towards our Citizens Emergency Response Team.
Questions?
Motion to approve 21517.
Motion made and seconded to approve 21517. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. 21617, an order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the FEMA AFG Safer Grant in the approximate amount of $315,116 for the purpose of said grant, which is to hire 2 new firefighters, with the grant covering 75% of the cost of these 2 firefighters for the first 2 years and 35% for the cost of for the third year. Chief Roy.
Council, thank you. As most of you councilors know that have been around for a long time, the last 10 or 12 years, we've been working towards this goal for a long time to try and get our staffing back to at least a minimum level. We've tried to do it in the most economical way. As some of you know, we've done a lot of things, like bringing in over $8 million in grants. Over the last 13 years, we've cut 18 positions from the department that included 2 deputies, 4 lieutenants, 12 firefighters that each year have saved the city a couple $1 million. We went back into the ambulance business in 2007, bringing in another over $500,000 a year to help pay salaries. We worked with the Firefighters Union with numerous cuts, and not only in pay but in benefits and time off to get to this. And our goal for a long time has been to get our department back to a level staffing that we can maintain and cover vacation time and personal time with staffing, and then use overtime to fill in on injuries, sick leave, fires, training, those type of things. So this was the final piece that we've worked towards. This will bring all our shifts evenly to 19 firefighters so that we can maintain a 17-person level. We're hoping around the year, but we're hoping for at least 10 years. We're hoping for 12. And again, this is something we've worked very hard for. Like Deputy Dadio has worked on these grants. This is our 5th SAFER grant that we've received over the last 7 years. And we received 1 stimulus grant from the state that also was federal money for staffing. So that's very unusual. That's a high number of grants. So you can see how much it's been deemed to be needed by our department. This is across the country, very competitive grant system, and these two positions are the final piece that we've worked for a number of years.
Questions? Counsel Boishman.
On these grant, how long do we have to keep them on? Just 3 years?
3 years, yeah, at the end of the 3 years, Counselor, then everything, there's no obligation on the city's
There's
part.
no obligation?
There is not, no.
Chief, there's no obligation for year 4? I thought we had,
Nope.
nope, there isn't?
There is
Okay.
not. After 3 years, you're done.
Okay.
Yep.
Counsel Donnelly.
Chief, how many people are scheduled to retire this year, next year? Is there any?
The mayor asked that question when we were looking at this grant, and I kind of did a poll. Over the next 3 years, we know of 2 people that have to retire because of the age limit, and then we believe there's another 7 going to retire. So this is, I don't know if the auditor handed out the schedule he did, but you can see in the 3 years, it's minimal payment on the city's part, and you can see every time a senior man retires, when you bring a junior man in for the first 7 years, you're saving a lot of money each year because of the changes we've made over the recent years. So this credit will more than pay for itself and then after the 3rd year, decisions would have to be made. Hopefully, we'll hold the staff or whatever has to be done.
Counsel Beazle.
Thank you. Chief, is there a program out there similar to what the police department has, that they're bringing on people as, I don't know if you want to call them part-time officers?
Yeah, the reserve staff.
Well,
We tried that a number of years ago. There was a number of problems with it. We had some opposition to it by some veterans groups. And at that time, we were under the consent decree for minority hiring. So I pursued it to some point, but then we didn't. Deputy Dadio has talked about that again recently, that maybe we should pursue that again. However, I talked to the chief in Leominster, and they did it about 4 years ago, and now they've gotten away from it. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's plus and minus to the program, especially when you know there's retirements, but Deputy Dadio is in charge of personnel, and myself are going to have further discussions on that, looking at maybe we should take another hard look at that.
yeah, it's only because it seems like it must take somebody a while just to get used to where all the streets are.
It does,
And-
and none of that, it makes a commitment on behalf of those folks
Right.
coming on. They make a commitment to take the job on beforehand. So there's lots of pluses to it, and there's only a few minuses, but we certainly will take another look at that.
Okay, thank you.
President Kuchmarek.
Chief, you mentioned it earlier, that's, this is an exceptional number of grants that we've gotten in a relatively short period of time in terms of safer grants. And that doesn't happen, without good cause, and that's a testament to the good work and diligence of your grant writers on staff. And beyond that, I think that's a testament to the hard work of your entire force and the level of success and achievement that you've had. Certainly, this department's been stressed and strained over the years with a number of calls, in particular towns like Fitchburg, Old Mill cities. So it's good to be able to, wherever possible, be able to bring in more firefighters, and particularly without it having a massive impact on the budget. So this is a great way of supplementing your existing force, particularly for the next 3 years, at a minimal expense to the average taxpayer. So thank you.
Thank you, and I just further up on, thank you, Counselor. The people that write these grants in our department are just firefighters, like Deputy Dadio and Jack Gilmartin and Dave Russo, and some of the people who have written these, PJ Roy. They don't get anything extra for it, they just do it, they do a great job at it, and we've accomplished 13 of these grants, and I'll tell you, sometimes I go to chiefs meetings and we take a beating because they think it's fixed, because this is fixed. Fitchburg gets too many grants. So, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that after these grants are approved for the next 3 years, there's a lot of reports and a lot of reimbursement paperwork to be done. And Rachel King, my administrative assistant, does a fantastic job doing all that. And she just does that as a part of her day's work. And there's anybody that deals with the federal government on grants knows there's a lot of work to it. So we appreciate the work she does too.
Motion to approve 21617.
Second,
Counsel Boishman had his hand up. If you would hold on the motion.
I would.
Chief, right now, how many men do we have on the force?
Right now, 79 uniformed firefighters.
79.
Yep.
Let me ask you one question, then you guys can vote on it. I noticed it's always Fitchburg. I noticed that other communities don't apply, like Lancaster, Westminster, Gardner. I never hear them why is it just Fitchburg besides not having enough manpower? Don't they have enough manpower too?
Leominster has more manpower than us,
Do they?
and they have had for quite a while, for at least 9 years now. So I don't know what they've applied for. I know they applied, they just got a ladder truck on a grant last year, 2 years ago. So I know they applied, but maybe, I don't know, Counselor, what they do in other communities. I know that other communities around us have received AFG grants. I'm not sure of each one that what they have.
All right,
Yeah.
all right, thank you, thank you.
Motion to approve 21617.
Second,
Motion made and seconded to approve 21617. Speaking on the motion, obviously with these kind of grants, the first concern that I have and many people have is sustainment beyond the life of it. So the council, I know myself with the police department as well, anytime these grants come up, I want to make sure future sustainability. We all talk about 3 years. I want these guys on in perpetuity. I don't want to go backwards because I believe this grant would solidify a milestone achievement in that you are now back to level staffing across all shifts. And now you're at the Fire Protection Association's recommended limit.
We will be.
So this kind of brings us to where we want to be that we haven't been in at least a decade. Keeping in mind the financial implications, even if there were no retirements, we're talking less than a 2% increase in the fire department's budget after year 3. But obviously, as you just heard, there's going to be almost 10 retirements in the next 5 years. So I, as a finance person, have no concerns with the future sustainment of these 2 new hires, even beyond the grant's life. I did my due diligence with the chief's help, as well as Auditor Brooks, and I want to thank him for this spreadsheet to give us some idea of what the cost will be. And thank you, gentlemen, for applying for the grant, and I will wholeheartedly support this and bring this department back up to what I consider to be a staffing level that is uniform throughout and only serves to protect their ability to do their jobs in the most efficient manner possible for the city of Fitchburg. Thank you. Motion made and seconded to approve 21617. All those in favor?
aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you,
Thank you,
gentlemen.
Counselor.
Last item on the agenda, 21717. An order that Loan Order 8517 of this council adopted on May 16, 2017, and approved by the mayor on May 18, 2017, authorizing the borrowing of $22.5 million to pay costs of constructing approximately 12,300 feet of water main on various city streets, including but not limited to replacing existing cast iron water mains with cement-lined ductile iron water mains, installation of new fire hydrants and valves, and the replacement of service lines, and the payment of all other costs incidental and related thereto, is amended to also permit the expenditure of such funds to make water tank repairs and/or roof replacements at pump stations. Mr. Deline.
When I came before you in the spring for this loan order, we had estimated the water main project to come in at about 2.4 million for the 12,300 feet of main that we're going to put in, are putting in right now. When the bids came in, the low bidder was just under 1.7 million, which was considerably less than our estimates. And what I'd like to do is that we've actually added some additional streets within the limits, so we're actually putting in another couple thousand feet beyond the 12,300. It'll take to next spring to get it done, but that still leaves some additional money available in that loan order. What's come up is that we do have a leak at the Oak Hill storage tank. We're in the midst of assessing. The tank is from the 50s or early 60s, and it does need some work and rehab. And I'm hoping that, that we actually can fit it within the additional monies here to kind of bring that back to a better condition. So the other thing that we need to do is a couple roof replacements. Well, actually, I'd like to do a number of pump stations. There are a couple that are in severe need and some that are going to be in need in the next couple of years. So I was hoping to group them all together and just get them all done rather than letting the ones that are in somewhat of a need get to a severe need and just try to, get ahead of that curve. So I'm asking that if we could also use those funds to cover those items beyond the water main project.
So the 2.5 million loan that was already granted
Yes,
to do 12,300 feet of main,
right.
you're saying you're able to do more than that? Do you know what the cost was? Not the 2.5, but what you said we ran under, so what was
Yeah, it was about 1.7 million. We're looking at spending probably about 1.9 million. another couple $100,000. to
For
do
the
additional-
12, for the
For do
12,000.
no, to do
Oh.
additional streets.
Okay, so.
We're gonna add additional streets that weren't even on the list initially because we got such favorable pricing.
So, how many feet beyond the 12,300?
Couple thousand feet, probably about a little over 14,000 in total.
And do you have any idea what streets you have on the list that would cover that additional?
Yeah, we're looking at
Footage?
Garfield Street is one,
Garfield?
Congress Place, Park Street, Newtonville Ave, and a couple others that we're looking at, so.
Okay. So
Not the whole streets, but the sections that are in poor condition.
So that's great news. And so the other 600,000, the 1.9 versus the 2.5 you've been given,
Some-
you're
some-
seeking for approval on replacement of these water tanks or repairs of these water tanks and roof replacements at the
Right.
stations? Okay.
And it just allow us to get ahead of the Oak Hill tank. We're still in the middle of a assessment, and if they come back in a month or two and tell me the whole tank needs to be replaced, I'll probably be before you because that's a couple $1 million. We don't think that's the case, but I'm just letting you know that. I'm hoping that we can do some rehab, some lining of the interior, and get it back to better condition than what it is right now. So.
Now, when we approved the 2.5, it was the understanding that it would be just for water main placements.
Correct.
Which I understand that's why this is coming for us, for an amendment to what that purpose was for. Just for the ratepayers' edification, can you briefly explain about the water tank repairs and roof replacements at the pump stations, how that benefits their water quality and the service we provide so that, because I don't want people to walk away thinking that we're not taking care of even more water mains,
Right.
that this is not really going to affect the customer.
Right.
Can you explain if and how it is?
Oak Hill tank, of course, serves the Oak Hill area. It's a just under a 500,000 gallon storage tank. It's the only storage tank for the area. It provides fire protection, backup supply if a pump fails or something like that. So it's critical to the water system in that area. Without it, we'd be in a difficult situation. So although we would like to put all the money toward water main, this is a need that really needs to be addressed so that we can continue to supply just water to that area, not necessarily good quality water, but just the fact that we can supply water and have adequate fire protection. So there is some cracks in the bottom of it that we know that need to be sealed up, but we're also assessing the roof structure too to make sure that it's a concrete dome on top of it and it needs some repairs, and we just want to make sure that that we can make repairs rather than replace it, and we just need to do that. Otherwise, that roof fails if we don't make these repairs, and or those cracks get larger, we're going to be in a tough situation. The pump stations themselves basically get the water to the city. We have a pump station out at Bickford Reservoir in Hubbardston, another one out at Mare Meadow Reservoir on the Westminster-Hubbardston line, and basically those pump the water to Meeting House of Westminster into the regional treatment plant in Westminster. So without those, right now the roofs are in very poor condition and are actually leaking. They probably should have been done a few years ago. We need to get those so that the water doesn't get in and cause damage to them, and we end up spending a lot more money rehabbing them down the road.
Thank you. Council Bezo.
Thank you. Once the water mains are all set, how long typically would they last after we're doing this?
We're hoping about 100 years. So
Okay. And on the tank so that the tank is 67 years old,
yes.
how long do those typically
They
last?
need periodic maintenance. I mean, we've
Okay.
actually hadn't spent a lot of money on that tank the city hasn't over the years, so
Right.
we've actually gotten good use out of it. It has been rehabbed, I think once, and some minor work in between then, but I mean, they should be good for 50 to 100 years with maintenance. So
Okay, so, I mean, at 67 years though, you're expecting, at some point, you're gonna have to,
at some point, I mean, but the initial assessment of the roof structure, the concrete dome, is actually that it's in pretty good condition, and we can actually get another couple decades out of it with some work to it. If we don't do the work to it, and right now there's some cracks, that water is getting into there, and eventually is going to deteriorate that structure. So we can seal that up and rehab it. We'll get another couple decades out of it. So
all these repairs basically are helping the longevity of.
right. I mean,
Okay.
they're important to the integrity of the water system. I mean,
Yep.
we not only have to provide good quality water and adequate fire protection, but we basically got to get the water to the city, and that's basically what what these things do. So
Okay, thank you.
Council Donnelly.
Thank you. I'm just curious how coordinated this, I'm certainly 100% in favor of doing the pipes. what I'm upset with in the city is many times we blacktop roads, and then the gas company or some other department will come along and dig up a newly paved road. Is this coordinated with the gas company and the DPW so that when we do this and we finally finish a road, it might not get dug up for a
Right. I actually think these thousands of feet of water main are some of the best coordinated projects. Unitel is doing all their gas main in those areas, and both Unitel, with the exception of a couple streets, both Unitel and the water division will be giving money to basically DPW to pave the roads. So sewer is also completing assessments of their infrastructure. They're not going to replace all the sewer lines, but if there's something that is failed, they're going to correct it. So and it's a lot easier to do sewer between two manholes, line of pipe if there is a problem. So, but they are looking for any major issues. But our hope is that when these projects are done on the streets that do get paved, that we don't have to go in there for some time. I'm hoping that's the case, but things happen sometimes, unfortunately.
Thank you.
But-
I just,
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
I live on a street
Yeah.
that wasn't done for 20, 30 years, and I was a city councilor, and people thought I might have had some influence. I had zero. People said thank you, but I did not ask for it. It was done. 10 years later, there's 45 holes in less than a half a mile in a newly paved road, so that's only one example of my frustration.
I mean, as far as the water division's concerned, I mean, all the service lines are being replaced out to the edge of the road, so we hopefully don't have to worry about those. I mean, sometimes something does happen, but we took it upon ourselves to make sure that all those were replaced. They may have been, maybe another 10 years of usable life, but it may only been a couple of years with some of the older copper lines. So we did everything. We didn't, skip one just because it's fairly new. We did everything over, so hopefully, as far as the water system's concerned, we don't have to go in and fix our leak for decades. So.
Thank you.
President Schmack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner DeLine, so I just want to confirm, this isn't a trench patch that'll be going in the roads. This is a curb to curb.
Right, and it's going to be done next year. So, and then it's not every street in here, but a good portion of them. So,
And am I correct in understanding it's typically done like 8 to 12 months after the fact, so it has a chance to settle?
Correct.
And then we go in and pave afterwards?
right.
Okay.
Right now, there's a temporary patch that hopefully will hold up through the winter months. There's a lot of patching because Unitel also did a lot of excavating, and next year we'd pave those streets. I think
I
they're going
think
to look pretty
residents
good.
always get scared when they see the trench patches and they start
Yeah,
to sink
yeah.
and or swell a little bit.
Yeah.
And I always explain to them, no, that's a good thing. It's settling. That means next year we're coming back.
And that's an important thing to know because we do temporary trench patches, which are going to last through the winter. If we were not going back into pave, we'd go back in and dig these up in a few weeks and do a permanent trench patch that's perfect. What we're doing is taking that permanent trench patch money and contributing that to the paving for DPW to get the street paved. So
Commissioner,
it's good for us. It's good for them.
I'll commend you. I know some of these areas, and you certainly have to come in front of us to be reactive to situations when things fail and are in need of critical repair or replacement. But what I have seen, the past several years, as you come before us and talk about proactive repair and proactive maintenance of our infrastructure, and I think had we had that decades ago, we wouldn't be in some of the situations we are now. So, I commend you and applaud that effort of trying to be preventative and proactive wherever possible and really trying to apply some kind of systematic way of replacing these water lines. So, thank you.
Council Boschman.
One question. Are we applying for grants for any of these water mains that are so low in our city? And if not, why not?
There are no grants for water
There's
main.
none?
No, not a single one. They do have lower interest loans, but the federal government makes it so tough for those loans to get a little bit reduction, all additional requirements that our consulting firms have told us that it's not really worth it. There's so much additional expense with administering them and other requirements that the small percentage that you gain on the lower interest rate. When it used to be 0% interest, it was much more favorable, but not anymore. But no, as far as grants, there isn't any. I do apply for grants for other things. Of course, the land conservation efforts. We're actually looking at some energy improvements through Mass DEP for both of our treatment plants, replacing all the lighting, things like that. So there are some grants in those areas, but not for water main replacement.
Even after Flint up on Detroit?
No, no,
Nothing, huh?
yeah, no.
I thought the EPA was gonna start something.
And I know I think they provide some help to Flint, but not to water systems in general. They kind of looked at them as an enterprise fund that they, should be self-supporting from their user rates. I think that's what they, they kind of considered, a business. That's how we try to run it as a business too, nonprofit business, of course. But, but yeah, I think that's sometimes the way they look at it is that the ratepayer should be paying, for their share in each respective city or community for the water system. So.
And what about the labor? How's the labor aspect of in your department? Good?
We're short a couple positions. We're going to be filling one this week, but yeah, it's with a couple retirements and stuff. Sometimes it's hard to find people that are have all the licensing. So
You want licensing prior. You don't train on the job training?
we do if if we see that's a good candidate that has a background and maybe construction that maybe doesn't have a CDL or something like that. But somebody's familiar with the field somewhat. We hate to put somebody in who's completely green, hasn't been around an excavator, or it's tough business working in those conditions. So it's something we want them to be somewhat familiar with. So
All right, thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
especially with a small staff. I mean, if you had a huge crew, it'd be different. You could kind of throw those people in, but we need people that actually really know what they're doing kind of from the beginning.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Motion
you.
to approve 217-17.
Motion made and seconded to approve 217-17. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.